Hello, everyone. Welcome to Better Talks. I'm here today with Dr. James. Dr. James, can you tell us more about yourself?
Sure, yeah, I am a my career has been in higher education. Out of high school, I joined the Army. I came from a challenging childhood, and so the Army was my way to get my head screwed on straight. And then after that, just kind of stumbled through my career. I went to college right out of the Army, one degree after another. I pursued a doctorate simply because it was hard. Literally, I like to say the Army tested my body, and the doctorate tested my mind. And then my wife had been telling me to consult for a very long time, but I didn't have an original thought to give to the world, and I wasn't sure what I would consult on. And then she just kept telling me to do this, and so I finally had that aha moment when God and the universe put all the pieces together, and I figured my original thought that I could put into print and put that out in a book. And now I like to say I'm an author consultant,
Specializes in what?
specializing in performance culture.
Performance culture. Wonderful. Um, I usually like to ask my guests to share with us what is their why in life, why they doing what they're doing.
Yeah, my why is to give back. Like I said, a really, really challenging childhood. I'm very fortunate to be here, and so I'm grateful every day that I am, that I draw a breath, that I'm able to give, and I've always wanted to find a way to give to the world. I didn't know how, was never clear to me. My career was in higher education, and I thought, well, that's giving to the world, right? Education's important. Knowledge is incredibly important. And but it wasn't really fulfilling. It was a good job, but it wasn't fulfilling at that intrinsic deep level. And so when I had the idea for my book, when I had my thought to put out there, that's when I decided, okay, well, here's my opportunity to really give to the world.
What really inspired you to embark on writing a book?
What inspired me to do it was the phrase seeking my daily bread. I had no idea how I would make money. I had no idea what would pay for this roof over my head and the dog food for my little English bulldog, right? Like I didn't know. But I knew that if I gave to the world, it would give back. And so my objective was really just to seek my daily bread and try to do good along the way.
Yes, that's a reasonable answer for sure, for sure. So, what is the title of your book? Because I'm very curious to know more. I mean, just a few scope of your book.
Yeah. So the title of my book is Leadership is Not Enough. The subtitle is An Operator's Guide to a Performance Culture. And that's really what my book is. It is an operator's guide. A person can buy my book. They don't have to pay me to consult. If they can implement what's in there, they're great. It's a quick read. It's a how-to. It's full of do's and don'ts. And it is all about creating the right environment for your employees to thrive.
Interesting. So you're saying that there's a connection between leadership and performance.
Absolutely. It's just not everything. The world makes leadership out to be the most important thing in an organization, and it's just not. And I like to say leadership is a lot like the icing on a cake. It's the sexy thing. It's what you see through the window. It's what attracts you. If you got a cake that's just icing, there's nothing fulfilling about that, and it's not going to, be nutritious over time. You really need to first bake your management cake, and that means creating the right operating environment for your employees to do their best work. Listen, leadership is important, but it's not what gets a job done. What gets a job done are the people, right? And there's this very old saying that people quit bosses and stay for teams. So you really need to focus on creating that right environment for social bonds to be strong, for your people to perform.
Interesting. Obviously, leadership doesn't get the job done. That's a profound point. But at times we need a vision because
Mhm.
the leaders usually produce the vision that the people can work with to be able to achieve the vision of a company or the vision of any organization.
See, here's the rub with the leadership setting the vision, and I agree with you. The challenge is the organization should set the vision, and the leaders implement it. Right? Every organization needs to have a mission, vision, and values. And the problem is leadership is temporary. It rotates. Your average public company CEO has got a 5-year life cycle.
Mm,
Across the board for every organization, your VP of sales has less than a 2-year life cycle now, right? And that goes across the board. So if every time a new leader comes in,
Mm,
they're implementing a new vision and a new strategy, then you're never going to have a consistent performance over time for your organization, right? 25% of your workforce changes over every year. And your leadership is changing over in cycles just like that. And if your entire operation is built upon the concept that your vision is built by your leaders and they're the ones setting the pace for the organization, setting the strategy, setting the direction, well, then every 2 to 5 years, you're redirecting, right? And how can you have consistent performance if every 2 to 5 years you're
mm,
shooting in another direction? I like to liken this to the military. Most people consider the American military as being built upon great leaders. Totally not. The American military is built upon a system that produces great leaders. Leaders are the outcome. They're not the input, they're the outcome of it. A good way to look at this and a way to explain it is that your leadership core in the American military rotates every 2 years. Every 2 years, there's new leadership rotating in every position across the board. And your enlisted corps is rotating every 4. The American military system could never function if it was always relying upon the leadership to set what the people are doing and any particular people, right? What they've done is they've created a system that everybody operates within so that everybody knows what they're doing, so that regardless of what leader comes in, the team can still perform. And I wrote about this in my book. I saw
mm.
multiple leaders in my time in the military, multiple leaders. At one time, I was part of an extremely high performing platoon. We we were exceptional. And we had multiple leaders come through during that time. And yet we knew how to perform and we performed well because we all knew our jobs. We knew how to do it. There was strong training in place and, all the pieces were there. So I'll stop right there, but that's kind of a lengthy answer to what we were just talking about.
So just to summarize what you're saying, that you want to build something that lasts. You want to build something or create a structure or a system in place where people come, people go, leaders come, leaders go. But the systems in place are consistent. And when people come, they fit into that system of higher performance. They fit into that system of a culture that produces, as you said, great leaders.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. And if you've done that right, you'll never hire your CEO from the outside. You'll always promote
Mm,
from within, right?
interesting.
And you'll always be developing your leaders as you're going. That's what the American military does. It's developing its leaders the whole way through, right? And an organization that is constantly looking externally is basically telling their employees they don't have a future. It doesn't matter what their position is,
Mm,
whether it be
mm,
frontline or VP, right? They're always going to be looking for that new top person from the outside. And every time you bring in a top person from the outside, they bring in their own cadre of leaders. And so you
yeah.
create this environment where everybody's like, well, I have a job, but I don't have a career with this company.
Mm,
And
interesting.
your best environments are ones where people believe that they can grow and develop over time in the organization and continue to climb. If they don't believe they can make it to the C suite, then you haven't created an environment where people can thrive. And that is one differential between the military and the civilian world is your frontline employee can become the CEO of a corporation. It's pretty hard for an enlisted soldier to become a general. It's possible, just not easy to do.
Wow, interesting. I have two more questions for you in terms of performance. Number one is that how would you measure performance or how would you define performance according to your book? And then the second question is that um, how can you motivate or encourage people to perform? Because for people to become productive at times, there are many factors that have to be put in place.
Mhm.
What are some of these incentives? What are some of these factors that can empower, equip people to achieve or produce in a higher capacity?
Sure, absolutely, Brian. The first thing is you have to look at how does the organization function? Is it stakeholder focused or shareholder focused?
Mm,
If it's shareholder focused, then your people don't have, they don't have a stake in it. They just have a job, right? And they're just going to do it, and maybe they'll move on and that kind of thing, right? But
interesting.
if it's a stakeholder driven organization, then everybody cares because everybody is treated as a valuable asset in that organization, and
Mm,
everybody is committed to the performance of that organization. Look, here's the thing: your organization's either growing or it's dying. It's real simple math. Next year, it's going to be more expensive to operate. It
mm,
just is. Everybody wants raises. Health insurance is going to be more expensive. Paper is going to be more expensive. Everything's going to be more expensive next year. So your organization's either growing or it's dying. And if people see themselves as part of that growth and benefiting from that growth, well, then they're committed to making it happen. So I define a performance culture as one where every stakeholder is committed to the success of the organization
Mm.
and they hold each other accountable to reach it.
Wow, wow, that's interesting because we live in a. I think the workplace have changed tremendously. I mean, we have the emergence of AI, people working
Mm.
from home as well. You know, now people feel like they're not just that they have a stake in an organization. People want to feel like their ideas matter. People want to feel like that. People want
Yeah.
to have that sense of belonging, that sense of ownership, that sense of okay, I'm not just working for you, I am working with you.
With you. Exactly. What's interesting about this, Brahim, and you talked about the shift, which is such a fascinating topic in and of itself. If you go back 30 years, well, 2025, so you might have to go back 50 years, but we'll just say somewhere between 30 and 50 years. And you go into a bookstore and you go to the business section, all of the books are about management. They're about managing people, right? They're about helping your employees thrive. That's what all the books were, all the business books were then. If you walk into a bookstore now, it's all about leadership. It is very hard to find a book about how to manage people. And here's the thing, people need to be managed, right? We're messy human beings. We have good days, we have bad days. We have personal things going on, right? And if your manager doesn't know how to help you be successful, if your manager does not know how to develop you as an employee, well, then what you end up with is a micromanager who just treats you like just a widget, right? Because they have no idea what they're doing, and it's really not their fault. 85% of the organizations don't train their frontline managers. And that's the most important position in the org. If you look at Gallup's organization's poll data, it shows you that most employees dread meeting with their manager,
Wow.
right? And if that's the case, that is a huge issue in your organization. If your employees don't want to sit down with their managers, I took over an organization once. I was brought in to do a turnaround, and the leader of my sales department, I talked to him about his one-on-ones. He goes, "Yeah, I have them every week." I said, "Well, when are they?" He said, "Well, when I can." And basically what this guy did is he walked around and he tapped people on the shoulder and he said, "Hey, do you have an appointment right now?" "No." "Great. Let's go have a one-on-one." And it basically put them on the defense because they had no idea what was coming and they had no idea what he was going to say to them, right? So I quickly put a change to that, made them all standard. Why? Because it respects the employee, it respects their time, and it makes them know that this is coming up so that they can be prepared for it versus being caught off guard and the manager playing gotcha with them.
Mm. Wow, wow, wow. Interesting,
It's a
interesting.
lot, man. My brain on this is so, yeah, putting it all into a book was really, really hard. At first, I had to hire a book coach because my
Wow,
original outline was, I don't know, 9 million pages long. It was way too long. And
wow.
and she's like, "Jim, if you're going to write a book, you got to whittle this down to something digestible." So there's a lot up here that I'm trying to get out.
No, no. I mean, you have some very, very brilliant
Uh,
perspective into this, and I really
okay.
appreciate hearing that from you. You know, so I'm pretty sure the book is gonna be high selling. You know,
Appreciate it,
because just
Brian.
having the conversation right now, I'm learning quite a lot from you. You know, your view about management and leadership and performance. And I've never seen the importance and impact of performance when it comes to leadership. But performance is very key because, as you said, leadership is not going to produce the result. You know, it's
Mm,
just going to inspire people, but people actually have to perform for the
right.
company to see the result that they desire.
And people perform for their reasons, not yours.
Hmm.
People are
Interesting.
performing for their own intrinsic reasons, not the organization's, right? And you got to understand that. And that's where that one on one meeting is so powerful. So if you taught your managers how to have these conversations, then part of that conversation is talking to the employee about how does this fit into their long term values? How does it fit into their personal life, right? What are they
Hmm.
hoping to achieve from this position? So many of us old timers, we grew up in a time where you joined an organization and you got promoted and you climbed the ranks and you just kept going up. And this new generation has seen the burnout and they're not really interested in management. It's a big issue for companies. Why? Because they haven't developed systems to help employees stay in their job and still be successful over time. And by successful, I mean beating the cost of living, right? If an employee is getting a 3.5% raise and cost of living just went up 4.2%, that employee is losing money,
Mm,
right? And within 5 years, that employee has lost a lot of money. And so they're working for their own reasons. And so we really need to understand as managers what those reasons are so that we can help them achieve them by achieving the organization's goals. So when you can align your personal goals and your organization goals, you create an intrinsic environment where the employee is doing it for themselves and for you. And that's critical to a performance environment, anyways.
I mean, most times when I look at resumes, when I do interviews, I always ask people, what do you bring to the company? You know, some people will say, well, I'm here to add value to the company, but we never ask from the point of view of the employer, what value am I going to add to you? Most times
Exactly.
is what value are you adding to my company? You know,
Right.
but I
Yeah.
also realized that, like you said, people have an intrinsic reason why they're working for a particular company. Number one, for your personal well being and welfare. And I've also realized that sometimes people tend to perform in a very high frequency because they have that sense of purpose and also progress. When people feel like they can, especially for somebody who just finished post secondary education, right? They're, this is their career path, and their interest is to grow in this company. They want to develop professionally, and then sometimes people find a sense of purpose working for an organization, meaning that,
Hmm.
like you said, they want to give back, they want to serve in whatever capacity.
Yeah, absolutely right. And most organizations don't spend the time up front to make sure there's alignment at that level.
Mm,
And if you don't, well, then you brought a. I consider employees assets. So what's happened is you brought in an asset that's actually probably misaligned, and that's
mm,
expensive all the way around. You got to put the right people on the bus,
yes.
and then you have to be willing to rotate their seats. Be willing to move people, right? Have that a constant part of your conversation. Is this fulfilling you? Are you getting what you want out of this? And
Mm,
is this the right seat on our bus? Is this the right seat in our organization for you? Right? I've led extremely successful organizations where I was constantly letting people move from one department to another because
mm,
they were seeking out something that they didn't know they wanted until they got into the organization. And so many leaders would never do that because they have a fear of loss mentality, right? They have that scarcity perspective, which is there's never enough and I have to hold on to what I have. And if I let that employee go over there, then I'm losing a top employee and I'll never be able to place them. And right. Versus the abundance mentality is, well, if I move that employee over there, our organization gains and I'll be able to get somebody else and tell them the story about that other employee. So now I've developed a one employee, made them extremely loyal to the organization because they've had the opportunity to grow into something they didn't even know they wanted when they came in. And the new employee coming in realizes that this organization cares about people so much as assets that they're willing to reallocate that asset when the timing is appropriate.
mm. Interesting. Interesting. Now, let's say if I'm someone who's interested to get a copy of your book,
Mhm.
what should I be expecting from it?
You should expect a how-to guide. This isn't theoretical. I don't pontificate. I get right to it and I go right through it. People who are used to reading can read it in a weekend, right? It's not War and Peace. Um, I wanted it to be digestible. I didn't want to write a big treatise on this. I wanted this to be something that a person could sit down, get through on a vacation or get through on a weekend if they really commit the time, because I recognize how busy executives are. And I have a stack of books on my nightstand that I need to read. Many of them I have read parts of.
Mm. Yes, 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 yes. Wow, wow. So like where can the audience get a copy? Do you have an ebook, audiobook?
Though they can go to Amazon. Leadership is not enough. or they could go to leadershipisnotenough.com. That'll take them right to my page, and they can order it through there. It'll link them over to Amazon. So it's really easy, leadershipisnotenough.com, and that'll take them to the book.
And usually I like to ask my guests to share with me their top 3 transferable skills.
Well, as a leader, number one is humility. So many leaders are just full of their own hubris, right? And I believe that humility is key. Um, I think one of the most important things a leader can say is, "I don't know. What do you think?" Even if they do know, just ask, "What do you think?" You'd be amazed how much you can get out of that simple question. Um, Number two is grit, tenacity. Life is hard. It just is. And if you don't think so, I don't know what planet you're living on. You've got to have the tenacity to get up and keep going. Um, because that just that grit and that tenacity to get it done is very important. And then there's this new phrase I learned just recently that I really loved, and it's "don't trip over yesterday." Right? So many people spend so much time looking backwards
Mm.
that they're not going anywhere. Right? And so we need to learn from yesterday, but don't trip over it.
One last question just came to my mind regarding performance because I realized that failure tends to discourage people from believing that they can perform at a higher level. So, what's your advice or what's your insight on failure and performance?
Everybody fails. Everybody fails. Right? Gretzky said, "You miss 100% of the shots you don't take." Right? Everybody fails, and that's what learning is. We don't learn from what we do right. We learn from what we did wrong, and we should improve from that. So if you fail, good. What'd you learn from it, so that you can be better next time? And bring that into an interview. Say, "Listen, I failed in this, and this is what I learned from it." Those are the types of questions I ask when I'm interviewing somebody. Tell me about your failures and what you learned from it, right? Tell me about your
Mm.
weaknesses and how you work on them. Everybody focuses on their strength and what they do right. I like to hear people who can self assess. And the key to that is recognizing things that didn't go right and what you can learn from them.
I mean, that's also part of the performance evaluation where you actually self critique yourself, do a self analysis of, okay, what you could have done better.
Yeah. I in my book, I talk about the fact that I believe every one-on-one should happen very regularly, weekly, preferable monthly if minimum. And the employee is the one who brings the data into the conversation, not the manager. If your employees can't produce the data that relates to their performance, and you have a problem, and you better figure out how to fix that, because your employees need to be able to come into that conversation well aware of what they did right and what they didn't do right and what they can do to improve it. No, it might be, hey, they need training, right? They need some additional help, and that's the manager's job, is to get them that help, because the manager's primary job is developing their employees. Hard stop. That's it. That's your job. You develop your people. If you develop your people, well, then you'll be successful because they're successful.
I mean, sometimes people find it very, very hard to to confront their manager to tell them the truth that you know what, I didn't do well in this area. I mean, like you said, we always tend to focus on our strength. You have to be very humble and teachable and somebody who's eager to learn to say, you know what, yeah, I mean, I didn't do well in this area, but I'm willing to improve. But sometimes when you make those type of statement that you didn't do well in this area, you're willing to improve, you might sound like you're weak. You might sound like you're not up to par. So what's your take on that?
Which is why so many leaders would never do it. So many leaders would never say, "I made a mistake." So many leaders would never say, "I don't know." Um, there are some amazing generals who would walk into any room and say, "Yeah, stepped on it that time, made a mistake. How do we fix it?" Right? And so your employees will never admit a mistake if you have as a leader are
Mm,
unwilling to admit your mistakes. Right? You have to create that environment
mm,
where psychological safety exists. And
wow.
to do that, you have to be willing to be humble and tear down your own hubris and say, "I don't know everything, and I make
Mm,
mistakes too. We're all human. We're in this together, so let's figure out how to improve it."
interesting. I mean, like one of the transferable skills that you mentioned is humility, which pretty much opens door or creates an environment where people can be vulnerable.
Yeah.
Vulnerable to say, you know what, I'm weak in this area. I'm not very good at this area, but I'm willing to learn. As you said, you leaders can move people from each each seat in the bus to find a perfect fit for them.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely right. And you're right. That vulnerability is critical, right? You have to be humble enough to say that in order to create the environment where people are willing to do the same.
Wow, wow, wow. Well, Dr. James, I don't have any more questions. That's pretty much a wrap. I'm very curious to learn more about your book, and myself, I'll get a copy as well because I'm a big fan of reading books, especially on leadership and management.